All right, it's top of the hour and good afternoon and welcome to Georgia DNR's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm Emily Wingo of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Floodplain Unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen-only mode, so please make sure your mic's muted. If you're having any Wi-Fi issues, you may want to turn off any cameras or other programs that you may have running. Please make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for communication as we will not be taking questions by audio. Aaron Kyle of Dewberry is monitoring the chat, and we'll try to help you with any technical matters. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credits to CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during the session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Please use the radio buttons to respond to the poll questions either in the pop-up window or in the chat box. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. Also, a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video to georgiadfirm.com. And with that, let's get started. Today's presentation is Flood Insurance 101, what floodplain administrators need to know. Our presenter today is Matt Buddy with Dewberry. Matt is a senior resilience planner bringing nearly 20 years of experience in hazard mitigation, floodplain management, flood insurance, and risk communication. Prior to joining Dewberry, Matt worked with FEMA Region 8 in floodplain management and floodplain management and insurance branch, where he partnered with state and local governments, federal agencies, and other stakeholders to advance flood risk reduction. He also supported FEMA's Risk M.A.P program by helping deliver and communicate updated flood risk information to communities and decision makers. Matt is a certified floodplain manager and is passionate about protecting wild spaces, rivers, and riparian habitats. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Matt.
Hey, thank you very much for that introduction, Emily, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for letting me join your lunch and give you an opportunity to speak on a topic that I feel is often very misunderstood, but in the work that I've done, find it to be incredibly important. Insurance is one of those things that kind of always feels a little like maybe a confusing topic, or maybe even a waste of money if you're paying those premiums right up until the moment where you have a loss and you need to file a claim. And then all of a sudden it becomes a scramble to find the policy, read through the details, and really try to figure out what's covered. And flood insurance is no different. And considering that flooding is the #1 hazard we collectively face, understanding insurance is really an important part of helping families and neighbors and businesses and the communities that we work in recover quickly and more fully. So, if we really want to build stronger, more resilient communities, helping people understand how to access what's covered, and how to file claims under a flood insurance policy is critically important. So really my goal today is to kind of demystify flood insurance a little bit, talk about the basics. I really want to make this topic clearer and more practical, so you all feel better prepared to maybe answer some of those basic questions, point people in the right direction, and really carry accurate information back to your communities. Before I get started here, if you could just do me a favor and locate the reaction button. It's the little smiley face in the top toolbar. And I'm curious, how many of you who are local floodplain administrators for your community, you were hired under a completely different job title and only later found out that you were the floodplain administrator after you were in that role. Give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, or any sort of reaction. Okay, I'm seeing quite a few thumbs up pop up. Some, oh wow, I'm kind of surprised at that. A little bait and switch, if you will. Well, this is obviously a very common thing that happens to a lot of folks who come in and start working at a community. The floodplain administrator kind of becomes another duty as assigned. And um, if you take nothing else away today, I hope that you remember that your voice carries an incredible amount of weight as the floodplain administrator and as a local official. What you say matters. It matters to the residents in your community. It matters to the elected officials, to the builders, to the realtors, to your emergency management community, and other people that you work with day in and day out. So when you can explain flood risk clearly, and in a way that is understandable, people will listen. And sometimes that conversation can make all the difference in the world. Um, I clearly remember a conversation that I had while I was at FEMA. I had a property owner call me up. She had a question about her flood insurance claim. And as we were talking, I looked up her property on FEMA's National Flood Hazard Layer. And I noticed that she wasn't in the special flood hazard area. So there was no mandatory purchase requirement that was coming into play. But I did know that we were doing a mapping project in that community and that we had already released some preliminary data, some draft data. And this was an area that we were restudying. So I was quickly going kind of back and forth between the National Flood Hazard Layer and this draft data that we had provided. And I noticed that she was going to be going into the high risk area based on the new maps. Well, they had had a flooding event and she was filing a claim. And I asked her, I said, how did you know to buy a flood insurance policy? And she said, my community official had contacted us and told us that the flood maps were changing and that they recommended that we consider buying a flood insurance policy. And sure enough, she was able to file a claim and become more whole. And so I always remember that. And I just want you to know, again, if you take nothing else away, that your voice carries weight. Okay, so where are we going today? Well, we're going to start off by looking at the current state of flood insurance, what's happening in Georgia. We'll go over some historic claims data and some coverage data and really kind of talk about what we know about current and future flood risk. Then we're going to go through some of the NFIP basics. We'll talk about generally some coverage amounts for flood insurance. I'm sorry. We'll talk a little bit about costs and premiums, how premiums are calculated, and where folks can go to get more information on getting a premium. We'll touch briefly on claims. We'll talk a little bit about some of the common misconceptions about flood insurance. And these are things that residents and property owners and even local officials can sometimes hear about flood insurance and flood risk, and they often will assume that it's correct, but it's actually maybe not quite accurate. And then we're going to finish with a call to action. And this is kind of what you can do in your role to help people better understand their risk, to really consider their insurance options and make more informed decisions before the next flood event. So hopefully that all sounds good to you, and that's where we're going today. Okay, so who even needs flood insurance in Georgia? Well, by the looks of the map on the right-hand side of this slide, I'd say every county in the state has some level of flood risk. So over the past 45 years or so, since 1980, the NFIP has paid out over $500 million in claims. That's billion with a B. And this is just over about 17,000, 17,500 claims, individual claims that have been processed by the NFIP. So if I'll save you from doing the math, but that averages out to just about $30,000 a claim. And so when anyone has a large unexpected expenditure, there's really three ways to pay for it. If this happened to you or me, we could use our personal savings if we have that amount of money saved up. The second way is to use some type of assistance. Maybe that's FEMA assistance. Maybe that's getting help from friends and family members or other donations or voluntary agencies. And then the third way is insurance. And obviously, insurance is going to be the way that people will be able to recover in the most full and kind of complete way. So really, we want to understand and really be able to push people to make sure that they're adequately covered. And so when they need it, if they should need it, that they have that in place and can get started on their recovery. So the risk is fairly widespread, but as you can see from this side, unfortunately, the coverage is not. So based on National Flood Insurance Program penetration data, and this is a couple months old now, it's from December of 2025, we only have about a 2% penetration rate. So basically, out of every 100 homes, only 2 of them are insured with flood insurance. So unfortunately, what this means is we have a whole bunch of properties that better either have a lot of personal savings or the availability to get some sort of assistance, or that we start communicating to those folks and getting them to understand why flood insurance is an important part of their financial risk portfolio. So the current landscape in Georgia in terms of NFIP and existing policies, we have just under 600 participating communities in the National Flood Insurance Program. These are communities that have agreed to adopt and enforce some type of floodplain management regulations in exchange for the availability to purchase flood insurance. 70 communities who are sanctioned. These are communities where FEMA has identified flood risk, but for various reasons, communities have either chosen not to adopt those maps or to not adopt regulations to keep new development flood safe. Just a little over 70,000 in policies, and in that kind of translates into $20.5 billion of coverage. And you can see the majority of that is in residential coverage. 55%, so a little over half, are structures that are located in the special flood hazard area. And we have 45% that are not. And I think that's kind of an important number to at least pause on for a second and consider. That 45% is, these are structures that generally are not under any sort of mandatory purchase requirement from a lender. These are individuals who have just decided, hey, I want to protect the life that I've built. I want to adequately insure myself and make sure that I'm covered. Understanding that Mother Nature doesn't follow a line on a map. So pretty evenly matched down the middle. This information, I pulled it as of April of 2026, but probably still generally following these trend lines. So, FEMA flood insurance rate maps are really just one way to look at flood risk. There's a growing inventory of companies and other organizations that are really doing their own type of flood analysis and modeling. And I pulled this information from Fathom just to kind of look at future flood risk from another perspective. And the way that they've done it in this particular analysis is showing things in terms of average annual loss. And this is really the expected financial loss from flooding over a typical year, considering the probability and severity of potential flooding based on their modeling. So I'll really draw your attention to the bottom row. And so based on their analysis, they project that currently, as of 2020, there's about 67,000, just over 67,000 population exposed to flooding today. But you can see, based on their modeling and some of the assumptions that they've made, there's going to be a 236% increase to over 226,000 that are potentially going to be impacted by flooding in just the next 20 or so years, 25 years. So, obviously these are just based on models and assumptions, and, predictions are always going to be uncertain. But I think the bottom line here is that just this understanding that risk is not static, that things will change in the future, and it's very likely that they get worse in terms of flood risk and exposure. It's also worth noting that, that the National Flood Insurance Program is not the only option. Private flood insurance is available in many areas, and for some property owners, this may make sense in terms of coverage options. It may make sense in terms of pricing. That being said, one of the challenges is that we don't always have a clear picture of how much private flood insurance coverage is actually in place across the nation or in Georgia. NFIP policy data is certainly more readily available. It's just private market can be a little harder to track. So, as we're talking today, we're really focused in on the National Flood Insurance Program and what's available through that. But I do think that it is important to know that there are other options available. There's been recent legislation that's been passed that has really opened up the availability and the ability to satisfy the mandatory purchase requirement through the private sector. So the NFIP is really a partnership. It's the shared responsibility. We all have a role, whether it's the federal government at FEMA who administers the program, whether it's Emily and folks at the state who help kind of be that liaison between the FEMA and the local community. But it's really the local community who makes the decision whether or not they are going to participate in the program and adopt and enforce regulations to make sure that flooding is not exacerbated by building in areas or building in a manner that's going to increase or exacerbate flood risk. So talking a little bit about NFIP coverage, it's generally divided into two parts, building coverage and contents coverage. Building coverage applies to the structure itself and other things, mechanical equipment that's required to run that structure, whereas contents coverage really applies to all of the personal property inside the building. The coverage limits are different depending on whether we're talking about residential or non-residential. For building coverage on a residential structure, you can get up to $250,000. For non-residential, it's $500,000. And then contents, you can see there, for residential is $100,000, and for non-residential, it's $500,000. You might be thinking, wow, these are pretty low coverage amounts. considering the cost of construction today and housing costs in general. And I will not disagree with you on that. This is something that FEMA is well aware of, and has talked about trying to increase these thresholds for coverage amounts for many years now. It was always a conversation when I was at FEMA. Unfortunately, these numbers are in regulation, and it's a little bit more challenging to increase and change them than just offering more coverage amounts. There's a whole process in order to change the Code of Federal Regulations. So I do suspect at some point it will be addressed and increased, but there are also private insurance and excess lines that are available. A lot of those excess policies actually require that you have an NFIP policy in order to get access to some of those other excess lines. Okay, so how is flood insurance, the premiums, how are they calculated? This is always one. This is if you've been following this space in any sort of even loosely over the last several years, you know that there's been a lot of big changes that have happened. So if you hit the rewind button and you go back to prior to 2020, and let's just use a quick example here. Let's say Emily and I live right next door to each other, and Emily was a lot smarter. She decided to buy the house on the outside of the special flood hazard area in a zone X. I wasn't so bright and understanding of my flood risk, so I bought a house that's in the special flood hazard area. Well, even though we are right next door to each other, we could be paying significantly different premium costs. Again, understanding that Mother Nature is not going to look at that line on the map and follow it. And FEMA really decided, hey, this is just not a good way to rate policy. So there was a big effort that FEMA undertook about 5 years ago to really start looking at a wider variety and combination of different variables to help calculate premium. So in combination of location, flood risk, building specific information, FEMA's looking at key sources of information like the flooding source, the distance to the water or the flooding source, the elevation, the foundation. A big one is replacement cost. Obviously, a more expensive structure to replace is going to have a higher claim amount than something that is maybe not as expensive or not as large. So that's a big factor. And then building characteristics such as occupancy, number of floors, construction type, and where the utilities and the mechanical equipment are located. So it's important to just note that premiums are not only based on the map or the flood zone alone, and that two buildings in the same area can have different premiums depending on how they were built, how high they are, how close they are to the flooding source, and how much it's cost to repair those structures. And so this image right here is kind of just to give you an idea. We have the FEMA data is kind of the underlying. FEMA still uses information from the flood insurance rate maps. There's additional data sources on buildings and structure data, as well as different CAP models looking at losses, that cost to rebuild, all of those rating variables, and then the fees and the surcharges. There's a federal policy fee. There's some other surcharges that FEMA has. All of these get factored in to FEMA's rating engine, and is what is used to determine the cost of a premium. So what does all that mean to the individual person who's just trying to understand how much is it going to cost me? FEMA came out with a new tool recently on the floodsmart.gov website. If you haven't had a chance to check this out, I would certainly recommend spending a little bit of time there. You can see on the left-hand side, it says 10 minutes or less to get a quote. It's really cool. You can put in your address, put in some basic home information, and it will give you a quote that is generally in line with what your flood risk is. And so this is a new tool. You used to always have to go to an insurance agent, and they would calculate the premium, looking up all of the information in these various tables. And now FEMA has really thought about the end user, the consumer, and has created a great tool that can be used by anyone who's has a little bit of time to go through and add in some information. So as we start talking, or you start thinking about calls to action, this would be a great thing to maybe link to on your community website, or start directing people to as you do outreach and do other types of public service announcements. And so once you get that premium, the next question always becomes, well, what can I do to lower that premium? If you were around back when FEMA was using the legacy methodology for rating flood insurance, you probably know that an elevation certificate was required because there were a very small number of factors that FEMA used. It was flood zone, it was elevation, the relation of the lowest floor of the structure in relation to the base flood elevation, that an insurance agent would use to calculate a premium. The elevation certificate is no longer required. Some of that industry data that I mentioned, the building data, FEMA can now calculate the elevation of floor elevations, and really start to come up with a picture of flood risk. However, it's not going to be as good or as accurate as sending a surveyor out into the field and collecting calculations and doing a FEMA elevation certificate. So the elevation certificate is optional now, but it may in fact provide a better rate if the lowest floor that is above grade is elevated more or higher than the information that FEMA has. The middle two bullets there, these are mitigation options that can be retrofitted to an existing structure to help decrease the premiums by adding in flood vents, flood openings, or raising the mechanical equipment and utilities to a higher floor. So there are options to lower premiums. The last one that I'll mention is the community rating system, or the CRS program. If you're in this program, your community's in this program, you likely already know about it, but really at a high level, the CRS rewards communities for going above and beyond the minimum NFIP requirements, really in four broad ways: informing the public, strengthening maps and regulations, reducing risk to existing development, and improving warning and flood response. So what does that look like in Georgia? Well, out of the participating communities, we have 54 that are participating in this community rating system. You can see that that's over almost $31 million in premium, and 41,000 policies. So just a little bit over half of the policies are in communities that are in the community rating system. So there are 19 different creditable activities that are organized under these kind of four broad categories that I mentioned earlier. The 300 series, which is public information, the 400 series, which is mapping and regulations, the 500 series, which is damage reduction activities, and then the 600 series activities, which is flood warning and response. If you have questions about the community rating system, or you want to know how your community can maybe apply or see if it makes sense to join that program, I would certainly encourage you to reach out to Emily and the folks there at the state, and they can get you pointed in the right direction. Important things to remember is the best time to buy a flood insurance policy was 30 days ago. The next best time is today. And that's because of this 30-day wait that FEMA has on all new flood insurance policies, generally speaking. And this is just really to keep individuals from watching the weather and seeing the hurricane coming or seeing the forecast and saying, oh, I better buy that flood policy. Insurance is meant to be purchased as protection, not because you plan on filing a claim. FEMA is always trying to balance the cost of the premium with the expected claims that they're going to be paying. So if they were always paying claims, the premiums would be so high, no one would be able to afford it. So you have to buy it for protection, knowing that you may be filing a claim, or you may be going many years without filing a claim. Hopefully you're not filing a claim, and hopefully that premium is there for others who need it. There are some exceptions to this 30-day waiting period. When there's the policy is purchased in conjunction with a loan closing, there's a 0-day wait. During policy renewals, that's also a 0-day wait. When there's a map change, there's a 1-day wait. And then there's some specific exceptions to flooding that occurs in areas on federal lands that are exacerbated by post-wildfire conditions. All of that stuff with the post-wildfire conditions happens when there is a claim that's being adjusted. So just understand that in most situations, it's the 30-day wait is kind of key. So filing a claim, again, this is one of those things that you start to realize, wow, I'm really grateful that I have that policy. Is at claim time, and I am very surprised that this has happened more than a handful of times in my career, where I heard an individual who did not file a claim because they didn't think that they were going to be covered, even though they had a policy. And if you get outside of certain timeframes, there is no ability to go back and file that claim. So first and foremost is file a claim. Call your insurance agent, talk to them, have them send an adjuster out. And in fact, the insurance company has, I think it's a 48-hour window when you call them to get an adjuster to call you back and start that claims process. When it's safe to do so, after the floodwaters have receded, and this is where you all might come in as community officials, if it's an area that is safe to go back into, that's when folks really want to start documenting the damage. The majority of us all have these handy little cameras that we carry around in our pockets. Take videos, take damage, don't throw anything away without documenting it. If you're going to start getting rid of nasty carpeting and other things, encourage folks to cut a square out and keep that somewhere, so when the adjuster comes out, they can actually see what the carpet looked like, what sort of condition it was in. All of this stuff will help make that a smooth claims process. And then the other thing is understand that there is an appeal process. This is something that I think often gets overlooked. If the insured is not happy with the way that the claim was adjusted, again, and this is where documentation is really important and comes into play, is understanding that there is also this appeal process that they can go through with FEMA and provide additional documentation and have their claim adjusted based on any sort of additional documentation that they have. And then finally, again, this is very likely where you're going to come in as local officials, is making substantial damage determinations. And this is obviously separate from the claims process, but I did just want to throw it in here on this slide because it's a very important step. I would encourage you to start putting those substantial damage plans together now, because it's much easier to figure out who's doing what and who's going where when the skies are blue and everyone has time to kind of clearly think through things, as opposed to after a flooding event and the state and FEMA are there saying, hey, what are you doing for substantial damage, and you're scrambling because you're doing 10 different things. So I would suspect if you have questions, you can talk to Emily. There's a lot of great resources and guidance out there on who should be involved and some of the conversations that you can start having pre-disaster or pre-event to make sure that you're well equipped and everyone knows what they're doing when there's an actual flood event that needs to be responded to. Okay, just a couple more things here we'll talk about on the flood insurance side, and I briefly mentioned this already, but there is this mandatory purchase requirement. This has been around since the early 70s. So any loan that is federally backed or regulated has to have flood insurance if there is a loan and it's located in the special flood hazard area. This is a lender requirement. This is not a FEMA requirement. I know FEMA, when I was at FEMA, I would get people calling me saying, FEMA is requiring me to purchase flood insurance. And it's really the lender who requires it, and they have to do it because Congress said they had to. So if you have folks that are not happy about being required to purchase flood insurance, they can call their congressman or congressperson. There are options to do letters of M.A.P amendment and other things like that if they're built high to get a specific determination. But mandatory purchase is still in play. It's one of the big reasons we still have FEMA flood insurance rate maps besides requiring floodplain management regulations is the mandatory purchase requirements. Those are what is being used to make those determinations. The MIRE, so lenders, anytime they make, increase, renew, or extend a loan, they're required to do what's called a flood zone determination, and they contract this out to a third-party flood zone determination company. They do hundreds of these things every day, and as I'm sure you can probably imagine, they don't spend a lot of time. It's a real quick down and dirty thing to do these flood zone determinations and say whether or not it's located in the high risk area. And that's why FEMA has the letter of M.A.P amendment process is to provide an option for property owners to provide more specific information. So increased cost of compliance. This is a separate part of all NFIP flood insurance policies that can provide up to an additional $30,000 if a structure is substantially damaged or if it's repetitively damaged and the community has language in their ordinance that they've adopted to bring that structure into compliance. So they can either elevate that structure, they can relocate it, They can demolish it, or they can floodproof it if it's a non-residential structure, and get this additional claim. It's a separate claim, and this is where the community has to be involved in making that substantial damage determination. Okay, we're going to pause here for a quick knowledge check. And hopefully, Aaron, you can launch the poll. Sorry, I've lost my view of all the participants, and I'm only seeing the presentation screen. So if you could go ahead and launch that, or if you're having trouble accessing the radio buttons on the poll, feel free to put the answer in the chat. But if you are looking for CEC credits from ASFPM, I would just encourage you to please go ahead and take a stab at the knowledge check. How long does it typically take for a new NFIP flood insurance policy to go into effect after it's purchased? A, immediately. B, after 7 days. C, after 30 days. Or D, after FEMA determines there is a flood in progress. We'll give you just about 10 more seconds here. Okay, 2 more seconds. If you want to answer it, go ahead. All right. So the correct answer is C, 30 days. Again, this can be another one that that can catch people off guard. So in your communications back to your communities, I would definitely encourage this to be one of the things that's discussed. Okay. Let's see. Now I've gotten back on the wrong screen. Okay. I'm sure we could probably sit and have a great discussion about all the common misunderstandings and misrepresentations that we've heard over the years. Here's just a couple that I've heard a lot in my time working in the flood insurance and floodplain management space. And the first few times I heard them, I thought, we got to clear these up. It's probably just going to be a fact sheet. We'll call the reporter, we'll do a PSA, we'll, whatever it is, but these continue to get reintroduced into the collective misunderstanding of a lot of folks. And it's, I'm not in the floodplain, so I won't flood. Well, we know that we all live in a floodplain. The floodplain, quote unquote, that most people consider is this special flood hazard area, or the 1% annual chance floodplain that FEMA maps on the flood insurance rate map. But, anywhere from 30 to 40% of the claims in any given year come from policies that are not in that high risk special flood hazard area. So Mother Nature does not read a line on the map. I think that's the third time I've said that today, so we won't belabor that one. The other one that I just can't believe that I continue to hear is people who say, well, I'm not in the floodplain, so I can't get flood insurance. Well, the reality is anyone who's in a participating community can get flood insurance, whether they're in the special flood hazard area, whether they're not, anyone can purchase. Oh, why do I need to pay for those premiums? Disaster assistance will make me whole. I heard this a lot. The last big disaster I was on was Hurricane Helene back in the fall of 2024, and this was one that I heard all the time. And I think the average FEMA individual assistance award is between $3,000 and $5,000. That is not going to make someone whole. It's going to provide kind of those immediate needs. Hopefully, it'll provide the opportunity to start making some repairs, but it's not going to make anyone whole. The other one that I hear a lot is I have homeowners insurance, so I'm good, I'm covered. Well, most homeowners policies specifically exclude flood insurance from coverage. Yeah, that's fine down in Savannah in those coastal communities, but we live here in the metro area. We don't need flood insurance. That's a coastal thing. All the counties in Georgia have some type of flood risk. So again, this is another one that I think people just think it's not going to happen, and if it happens, it's not going to impact me. If I need flood insurance, my lender will require it. Well, maybe if you're located in that special flood hazard area, if you have a loan, they're going to require coverage on the building, but not your contents. So there's all of these different iterations where people need to understand that the lender may require it, but not necessarily. And then the last one kind of goes hand in hand with that is flood insurance is only for homeowners. I'm a renter. I don't need to have any sort of coverage. Only if you want to protect your contents, your furniture, and things like that. Renters can buy a policy. And so we're going to wrap up here. I think I have 2 more slides. Just a couple of things, a couple of takeaways when you go back to your community is really get people to understand what their risk is. We have a lot of different tools. I'm sure you have tools in your community, the FEMA flood insurance rate maps. There's all sorts of different draft data, Georgia DFirm, all of these different tools that we can use to help understand and communicate risk. Really promote flood insurance before storm season, before hurricane season. Again, we have this 30-day waiting period. We don't want people to go out, purchase a policy, and be on day 28 or 29, and this certainly has happened, and they don't have adequate coverage. We want people to buy it for protection, not because they're going to file a claim. Renters need to consider contents coverage. It's not just for homeowners. Remember, there's mitigation options. There's a way to reduce your premium. You can get an elevation certificate. You can add in flood vents. There are options to raise mechanical equipment to higher floors. And then we talked briefly about the community rating system. Lots of good resources on floodsmart.gov. Consider working with your IT folks to link to that page from your community's website. Look for unique partnerships. If there's different community groups, HOAs, realtor associations, all of these have the ability, very similar to the second slide. They are trusted voices in the community, and so start to think about who are those trusted voices, who are those partnerships that you can create and leverage to help get some of this information out. And then there's always opportunities to get information out in various mediums through newsletters, utility bills, social media. I'll leave you with this. This is from floodsmart.gov. There's a new tool where you can put in your flood risk. If nothing else, this would be something that you might want to start using or directing people to if you have nothing else that's more specific. You can put your zip code in and find out what your flood risk score is. I will pause there. I know that that's a lot of information. I'm more than happy to take some questions. if anyone has any.
Well, we do actually have one that was thrown in to the chat. When is the Georgia floodplain at the Georgia or excuse me, GABLE viewer dot Dewberry analytics to go into effect? Um, I'm gonna ask just for Jarrett to jump on real quickly if he can and explain when the Dewberry Analytics viewer will go into effect. And while we're waiting, okay,
The
Jarrett.
the analytics viewer?
Yes, if you'll look in the
Oh,
chat,
I'm sorry. I
the
missed it.
link is
Okay.
in there.
Okay. So the BLE viewer, apologies, I'm following now.
Okay.
So that data is gradually being incorporated into regulatory products in southern Georgia, and it's going to take time to get all that rolled up. It's going to take a lot of time, unfortunately, because the regulatory update is like a 4 or 5 year workflow. And so that was kind of the intent of the BLE viewer, is to kind of fast track that analysis, put it in your hands to be used as best available data in the interim, while it kind of waits to get rolled up into the regulatory products. Right now, we're mostly focused on the southwest corner of the state. Lower Flint's watershed is just now going effective. Actually, just a couple counties went effective just yesterday. And then the remaining counties in the Lower Flint watershed go effective towards the end of the year, November this year, I believe. And then the surrounding watersheds in that area, literally that southwest corner of the state, several of them are on a little later track, having just had preliminary maps issued. Some have detailed studies that are ongoing. There's about 6 or 7 different watersheds being incorporated into the regulatory products. And then as you get into the middle part of the state and all in the southern half of Georgia, the middle part of the state, and heading eastward, those are on a further out track, and there'll be plenty of coordination from discovery to kind of walk you through the proposed updates and how that's going to go and get rolled up into the regulatory products. Potentially draft map review meetings if there are additional detailed studies that are going to need to be conducted, and PDCC meetings and open houses and so forth. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
help too if you let me know what county might have a better Dooley. Okay, Dooley is one that we have recently done. I believe it was last year we did discovery. We have the BLE established. There may be, I don't remember if there's detailed study. Actually, I don't think there are detailed studies. So right now, we are loosely planning to have draft map review meetings with Dooley County as a part of the Middle Flint watershed. Um, and at that point, we'll have an update for the proposed path for preliminary map releases. But that should be within, I think, the next year-ish that they would be in the preliminary maps. And then it would be a few years after that before it goes effective. So a long way out for Dooley County before it becomes effective. But it's there and available through that BLE viewer for you to use and reference as best available data. And if you have any questions about the data or how you can use it, please feel free to reach out. Be glad to help.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate that.
Sure, absolutely.
We are kind of coming to a close for our meeting today. So thank you, Matt, for that very informative webinar. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. We will be keeping the chat open for a few more minutes, so you can still throw in your question. Just be sure to include your email so that we may follow up with you. Mark September 9th from 12 to 1 on your calendar for the next Lunch and Learn webinar. David Griffin will be presenting a history of dam safety in Georgia and its intersection with floodplain management. Please make note of the registration link in the web online as well as in the chat and on the screen. And again, we greatly appreciate your completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for today's session, available only to certified floodplain managers that completed the polling questions and provide their name and email and address in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you're requesting continuing education credits, those certificates will be emailed separately. Once more, our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for September 9th, so be on the lookout for that invitation. With that, thank you again, everyone, for attending today's event. For those who don't have any questions, this does end our Lunch and Learn webinar. Have a great day, everybody.